up, you guys? All right, so I decided to start this new relationship video series around conscious partnership and sacred union with a very hot topic. This is a very polarizing and challenging topic, but it's one that I personally have done very deep work around. I've had a lot of success with this. I'm helping both myself through this and other clients through this. So I also have a different perspective than a lot of people, and I'm weaving in not just my experience and over a decade of experience with this and working with hundreds of people, but also Tibetan Buddhist teaching. So the lineage that I study is how to truly love people, everyone, right? Like that's the whole point. And so that's a big ask, you know what I mean? So when we're looking at a relationship dynamic where you want to cultivate unconditional love, but there's been a rupture in the trust or in the integrity of the relationship, it's going to require you off the bat taking radical responsibility for your part of things. And this is actually where people struggle more, is like taking ownership of their side of the street, ironically. Okay, so I wanted to read this short paragraph on sacred relationship because this is a great preface to this topic. And this is called The Alchemy of Relationship, and it's just like 2 or 3 paragraphs. And take with it what you will, take what resonates, leave the rest, but this is a precursor to what we're going to discuss. So Tom says here in, again, the Magdalen Manuscript, my favorite book and guide for conscious partnership and sacred union, he says, many of us do relationships the way we play poker. We do everything possible to get the upper hand. And if that fails, we bluff. We pretend to hold cards we don't have. We cheat, we lie. And while this is the model for many a relationship in our postmodern era, it's not the model for sacred relationship as described in the manuscript. He says, let me be very upfront here. Sacred relationship is not for everyone. In fact, I suspect there are far fewer persons capable or even willing to undertake it than there are those who prefer to play emotional card games. This type of relationship demands utmost honesty, both with oneself and with one's partner. Instead of hiding our cards, we lay them all out on the table. All our hopes, all our fears, all our petty and jealous thoughts, all of our connivings, all of it gets laid out in the clear light of awareness for our partner to see. And he or she must do the same. It will not work if there are back doors unlocked with mental escape in mind. It will not work if both partners are not absolutely, impeccably honest with each other. And the reason for this radical type of honesty is that without it, the alchemy of relationship can't take place. Now, this may be a new term to many, even students of internal alchemy, since the dynamics of intimate relationship are rarely discussed in the 4 major alchemical streams. And he says Egyptian, Taoist, Yoga Tantra, and Buddhist Tantra. And so he goes a little bit into the alchemies, and I'm going to skip that part. But it's basically saying, like all types of alchemy, there must be a container for the reaction to occur. A diamond is forged in the fire. That's a form of alchemy. It becomes something else in the fire. So it says in this case, the container of safety and appreciation, the relationship is the thing that provides the reservoir for transformation. If there's a lack of safety or appreciation, this type of alchemy cannot be undertaken. And if you've decided you wish to try this type of alchemy in your relationship, I suggest you do an analysis first. Honestly assess if you feel safety and appreciation in your relationship. Again, I believe honestly that you can do this and you can start where you're at, and the other person does not need to even know initially. Like you can actually start these practices and your partner doesn't need to be aware. You could literally do your own little test of it, like a little karmic test, and be like, let me see what happens when I actually do some of these meditations without telling my partner what I'm doing. Let's see if the dynamics between us change. But there does need to be a base level of safety. And so it says, our psychological selves are much like swords made from steel alloys. They've been forged in the hot, searing foundry of our childhood, in the formative pressures of our early experiences. And it's in this early period of life that bonds the elements of our psyches together. And this steel, this was done under immense heat and pressure. right? It says some of us were abused by overbearing or downright hostile or even destructive parents. Some of us were left to our own devices without any support or guidance. And every kind of parental-child relationship falls in between these two polarities. So it says the possibilities of childhood pressures are virtually endless. And so are the psychological alloys that result from these types of experiences. So, you have to remember that as well. And then he goes on to say, some of us emerge from this childhood foundry with sharp edges, others of us are blunt, some of us hold our edges, and some of us can never seem to hold anything. But in the alchemical work of sacred relationship, we voluntarily put ourselves back in the foundry. The heat that arises between two people when their neuroses rub against each other can get quite intense. Yes, again. If both people can find the courage to be radically honest with themselves, first and foremost, and then with each other in these searing moments, these alloys can be altered. A new type of aliveness then enters the relationship, fueled by the energy of psychological truth. The thing is, most of us will do almost anything to avoid psychological heat. When we get uncomfortable, most of us want to get the hell out of Dodge. For some of us, that means literally packing up and leaving town, or at least getting out of sight. For some of us, it means that we're physically present, but no longer emotionally present. We numb up. We become automatic. We move like robots. And it says some of us numb out with drugs or alcohol or sex, and some of us do it with television. Like, we can find all sorts of ways to avoid facing ourselves. But he says, the real question here is this: what do you do when things get psychologically too hot for your taste? What do you do when you're on the verge of feeling something that you don't want to feel? For those in sacred relationships, such feelings are a call to presence. And this is really what I'm going to talk about in this video. It's a time to be radically honest and for both partners to express their true feelings, no matter how embarrassing or scary they might be. And by speaking these truths, an enlivening element enters the dynamic. Psychological honesty results in psychological insight, and with insight there's hope for awareness, and with awareness there can be change. But again, it's like in sacred relationship, these things invariably float to the surface like mud that's been stirred up from the bottom of the barrel. The thing to realize is this doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong, meaning sacred relationship. It probably means you're doing it right. You're going to dredge up all of the shit, all of the patterns, all of the limiting beliefs, all of the fears. Like, that's why these types of relationships are purification containers. And what makes sacred relationship truly sacred is that it's a holy way of being. It is. It says the root of the word holy actually means to make whole. So when we do something that creates wholeness, in this case like psychological wholeness or like an integration, we're engaged in a sacred or holy act. And so it says, again, he says, this isn't for everyone. You'll probably know if you're a likely candidate because you'll feel it in your soul and in your heart. If you enter this path, know that there are no manuals. That's why I'm here doing these videos, you guys, and that's why I've been doing this work for a decade. Like, who's out there helping us do this? There's not many people. There aren't even many people that I can go to that I truly feel get it and can go this deeply. So it says this path to spirituality has traditionally been one of solitude. And while times of solitude, which I also had long periods of solitude, and I know that that's because this type of work, for me at least, and I think to teach it in full integrity and to not be codependent and to not like use a partner to validate this experience or the growth, like I had to go through long periods alone. But he says, that might be necessary for some time, but in sacred relationship, like if you really feel this in your heart at some point, like, you know what I mean? You're meant to be with someone too. But it's very humbling. You might think you're ready years before you're actually ready, you know? There is that. So he says at the end here, basically, he says there's an implicit danger in writing about such a thing as sacred relationship. For one, Tom says, the author, some people might think that I'm an expert, and I assure you that I am not, and I wish to place this into written record. In fact, I've found myself many times running from the heat of this type of relationship, because as I mentioned earlier, when the emotional and psychic heat of sacred relationship gets really hot, there's a tendency to feel that you're being obliterated. Of course, what's being obliterated, or at least challenged, is our own neurosis, not our existence, even though it feels like that. Our neurotic habits are tenacious, and they don't give up easily. My experience is that they often fight to the death, so to speak, rather than fade gracefully. but that's just my personal experience, and I don't wish to imply that this is going to be yours. He says, the art of sacred relationship, I believe, is learning how to be in the heat of transformation and not automatically run from it. I also think that this way of being in relationship with another is one of the most challenging and rewarding things I've ever asked of myself. Because this way of relationship is so dynamic and so life-changing that I think the entrance into this path should have a warning sign. And so here it is. Warning, it says, in caps, all caps. Enter this path with sobriety and abandon. Know that those who enter this path will never be the same, nor will you. Okay? And that's the end of that little section. And I wanted to start out with that to go into what I want to share with you today on repairing trust after a betrayal and a connection. So a few disclaimers before we get into this, because I feel like this is necessary because these topics tend to activate people. Number one, this is not beginner's practice, okay? This is not for beginners. You have to have a baseline of like readiness, willingness. If in any way you're feeling like a victim, like this is not going to be the teaching for you yet, okay? Number two, never ever in any video I've ever made or will ever make am I suggesting that you stay in a situation that's damaging, like physically or harmful, that's abusive. No, that's not what these teachings are for. Absolutely not. You need to get the proper support. And what else? Yeah, really those two things are the most important. And number three, this topic can feel triggering depending on where you're at. You have to remember that, like, you'll find these videos or these teachings wherever you are today. The level of consciousness you're at now is how you're going to receive these. That could change in a week, in 6 months, in a year. You could come back and have a totally different experience with this. So with all that said, let's dive in. The reason I'm making this video is because I had a client come to me in an intuitive reading who is trying to mend in her connection where they were together in a relationship for several years, broke up for about 1.5 years, and are now have reconciled and have come back together and want to be a couple again. However, quickly the issues started resurfacing, and one of the issues that has resurfaced is that the person that came to me told me their partner has this pattern of lying. And it's not malicious, it's really to avoid being abandoned. But this person feels concerned because she's like, I don't know if I can trust this person, and we both really want to heal this, but I'm feeling super torn and really uncomfortable, and I don't know what to do. Okay, so that's the context for this. Let's start out by saying, in all of my content, you know, I'm teaching people how to operate from a baseline of unconditional love. But unconditional love is not what we're taught. We're taught conditional love. Give me this, I'll give you that. More like a transaction. And also, if you don't give me that, then I'm not going to love you. Now, again, that's nuanced because I'm not saying to stay in relationships where you're being harmed. I'm not saying to never have any boundaries. I'm saying that if the baseline is not unconditional love, then you can't really practice the things that I'm going to share with you today. So that's like a commitment to love that is a lifelong commitment. Because you have to remember, these types of, if you're truly in a conscious relationship, first of all, you're lucid, you're aware, you're taking full responsibility, but also you're devoted, period. You're not like jumping out the door when things get hard. You're not back and forth all over the place. Although, you know, in the beginning, it happens. We might have to continue to recommit over and over. But like, what do you think a marriage is? You sign a paper, it doesn't mean shit. You can sign a paper, you can put a ring on your finger. That doesn't mean anything. What means something is your intention, is the way that you choose to show up every day. It's your devotion. It's your choice that you're actually committed to the relationship, committed to that container of growth, and committed to love. So to me, real love is freedom. And when you, freedom, like think about that, freedom. You don't feel chained, you don't feel like someone's, you know, manipulating you into being there. Real love is a choice every single day that you make. And when you create a safe container for truth to arise, which most relationships are not, by the way, not intentionally, but they're just not. It's not a safe place for truth, which is why this pattern is so prevalent, which is why so many people told me immediately when I asked the question, do you want this video? Yes. Because people don't know how to deal with this. So when you create a safe container for truth to arise, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't like it, and without punishing the other person, that is where unconditional love can really start to blossom. But the second that people feel, I'm going to put in between quotes, betrayed, because this could be, people could perceive that in many ways. But let's just, the second people feel betrayed, they feel wronged, they oftentimes want to, like, I say, like, dump the baby with the bathwater. It's like, get rid of that person, start over again. Oh, they did one thing wrong. I'm out of here. I'm going to go be with somebody new. F you. Like I said, if you want to be in a conscious partnership, sorry, they're working outside my window. If you want to be in a conscious partnership, you have to understand that this is alchemy. And alchemy is like diamonds that they don't start as diamonds, they start as rocks, right? And then they go through the fire and they become a diamond. So you're going to have to purify so much of your own shit. That is the point of these relationships. That's why most people don't go that far. But I want to go all the way, It's even why I became a Buddhist. I'm like, if I'm here and I'm doing this, then I want to go as far as I can go with this. As deep as I can go, as far into unconditional love as I can go in this life. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to make my best efforts. Which means that you have to be so committed to being in the burn, in the discomfort, in the purification. That is conscious relationship. It's really a purification. Forget all the good stuff, because that's what makes it worthwhile. You know what I mean? There's a lot of beautiful aspects to being in this type of partnership, because where love really exists, the possibilities are limitless. But most people have a really hard time even scratching the surface of this energy. And this is why. People want to dump the baby out with the bathwater. Forget that person. They hurt me one time. I'm out of here. I'm going to go find somebody better than you. But you are at the root of every single pattern that's appearing in your life, that's reappearing in your life, or that will appear in your life. You are at the root. Now, the teaching behind this, the Buddhist teaching behind this, is that your reality, the way that we see it, the school that I study, your reality is not coming at you. It's coming from you, from your mind, from your karma, which is the movement of the mind and what follows. And we believe in, past and future lives. So you're thinking this whole accumulation of the way that your mind is habituated is what's creating your reality. And I say that because we'll just use the ice cream example. Like, if I like chocolate ice cream, like, not everyone in the world likes chocolate ice cream. Like, some people are like, ew, I hate it. Some people are allergic to it. So we know that the goodness or the deliciousness or the pleasure is not coming from that ice cream self-existently. Like, it's not the ice cream where it's coming from fixed in that way, or else every single person in the entire universe would love it, would have the exact same experience of chocolate ice cream as you do. But we know that that's not true. Or music, for example. You love this specific song, it gives you tingles, it makes you feel something, it makes you cry, and then you play it for your sister and she's like, ew, I hate this song, it's awful. Like, the joy is not coming from the song. If it were, then everyone would have the exact same experience of it. So if you think about it that way, it's not coming from the object. It's coming from me perceiving it, right? And then it's like, oh, I'm having this experience of chocolate ice cream, but you might have another one, they might have another one. So it's coming from me, it's not coming from the ice cream. Okay, so if you apply that, and that's very light, just to give you an idea here. If the world is coming from your mind, a projection of your mind and your perceptions, the empowerment is that it can change for the better. That's the huge plus here. But in order for that to happen, you have to be like, okay, then I'm radically responsible for the world that I create. Which means if I'm not happy with the experiences that I'm having, then I'm going to have to do some deeper diving. I'm going to have to go deep inquiry into my own mind, what's going on in there, shift some things, transform things, purify things, and change things so that you can have a new experience out there, quote unquote. Same thing in your relationships. Like, they are the mirror. The experience is also coming from you. So instead of jumping to blame games, drastic conclusions, ultimatums, right? So much can be healed in our relationships when we start, number one, by, again, choosing to be in full ownership of our part of the co-creation, and then spend time going within yourself to transform these patterns. You've got to change your behavior. You've got to shift your mindset first. And so much of the time people don't believe that. They're like, no, that person needs to change with me. They need to be on board with this. They're not doing the work. But I'm telling you right now from personal experience and many clients, you have to choose to trust that your work is what's going to transform your outer world. It takes a little time and some faith. But I've seen it time and time again. Like I said, I've seen such drastic results with this in my own personal world that I know that for me it's true. But my clients have also experienced this. Doing meditations and doing their practices without saying a word to the other person. In some cases, they're not even in direct contact with these people right now. Could be like a parent that they're estranged from, an ex-partner or whatever. They do these practices and then suddenly they get an email sometimes, or they get a phone call, or they get a message, or something shifts like dramatically in the connection for the better. And they're like, I didn't even have to say anything. And I'm like, right, because it's coming from you first. Okay, so this is all the empowerment. If reality is not fixed, if your partner, the person, they're here, the person that you're having this poor experience with, they lied to me, they betrayed me, they hurt me. If this experience is also coming from you, then it can change, because why do I see a kind, honest person if I look at your partner and you see a liar? That's the experience you're having right now. All right, so number one, I'm just gonna go through like a little list here. I think this would be an awesome workshop, so if this is really interesting to you, drop below if you want the workshop and I will make a workshop about this. Okay, so number one, in order to really transform and build trust after a betrayal, one, can you hold two truths at one time? Or do you tend to collapse into extremes, like one extreme to the other? Because part of being a safe space for truth to reside, you have to be able to hold the tension of opposites, like fire and ice. Again, even Buddhism is called the middle way, because we know there's like your experience, my experience, and then there's another experience that's happening outside of our perceptions. So if you want people to be honest with you, but you can't hold in your nervous system or just even mentally, you're not tolerant of an opinion that you disagree with, and you can't accept that that person has a different experience, and your immediate reaction is to fight with them, yell back, be self-righteous, push your agenda, or punish them for having a different opinion, that's like number one, that's something for you to reflect on. How can I be a safer space? How can I be a safer space for this person? Now, what often happens with this pattern when somebody feels betrayed is that they vilify the other party. They automatically are like, I'm the good person, I'm the victim, and they're the bad guy. Now they owe me everything, and I'm just going to be over here as if you have no part in it, as if you didn't co-create this together, which you did. It doesn't work that way. So number two, if you keep finding yourself in situations where people are being deceptive, the first thing you need to ask yourself, deceptive, lying, withholding the truth, you need to ask yourself, where am I not being honest with myself? Where have I not been honest with myself in the past? Think of all the ways right now. You have to be so honest with yourself here. Think of all the ways in the past or even in the present where you've lied to yourself, turned a blind eye, avoided something difficult, told yourself a different story because the other one was too hard, chose to ignore something that felt off, not said something because you didn't want to rock the boat, not spoken your truth because you were afraid to be abandoned, you were afraid someone was going to judge you. Really think about that. And now go back to the question, if I keep finding myself in situations where people are dishonest with me, where am I dishonest? People can only mirror the beliefs and the behavior that we're either acting out or the things we believe inside. Relationships are a mirror, whether we like it or not, always and forever, as within, so without. If you're judging other people for lying and you feel really extreme judgment around this, it's because your own shadow around deception, around dishonesty, or around your own lack of integrity is something that you haven't fully brought love to. You haven't fully accepted or integrated that piece of you. We only judge what we refuse to accept in ourselves. That when we have really harsh feelings around certain things, like those are parts of our shadow that we're not actually fully loving yet. It doesn't mean you have to like it like it's a nice thing to do. It's to accept that we all have shadow side. We all have a shadow side, and we all have these aspects that we're not necessarily proud of or that we don't like, or they might even be harmful. But if we don't bring love there, if we don't bring awareness there, then it silently runs our life. Another thing to think about here is that if you are conflict avoidant, which a lot of people are, and if you, like, for example, if there's been any pattern around codependency, or you have really anxious attachment issues, or even like fearful avoidant, which is a combination of anxious and avoidant attachment. And I'm not like huge on attachment theory, but just to make it easy to understand here, I think a lot of people are familiar with that pattern of like either chasing or avoiding, really clinging and grasping and having a massive, anxious attachment would be like a massive fear to be alone, massive fear of abandonment, to the point where you will cling and hold on at all costs, no matter how damaging it is to you or to your self-esteem or anything else. If you're more avoidant, you have a tendency, you can be in a relationship and be avoidant. But if you're in a relationship and you're avoidant, you might like stonewall, shut down, withdraw, avoid, resist conflict as well by pulling away. Maybe part of your control mechanism is to not communicate, to take something away from the partner, like don't be intimate with them, don't speak with them, etc. But if you're conflict avoidant, no matter what your attachment style is, it's a breeding ground for lying and withholding, because you're essentially sending the message to the other person that disagreements aren't allowed or acceptable. Therefore, do not say anything that's going to create any discomfort. Truth doesn't just live in your comfort zone. I'm going to repeat this. If you are conflict avoidant for any reason, you don't have good communication skills yet, you're afraid to be abandoned, you don't want to be alone, maybe the partner that you attract has a tendency to get very angry, and so you don't want to rock the boat. Again, if you're with a partner who has major anger issues, you have major repressed anger too. Like, we only attract like what we are. And so, but my point in saying that is not to make you feel bad, it's to make you understand that this is all transformable. So if you're conflict avoidant, again, it's a breeding ground for lying and withholding and a lack of integrity, because you're sending the message like, disagreements are not allowed here because I can't handle it and I don't like it. Therefore, don't say anything that's going to rock the boat and make me uncomfortable or make us uncomfortable. But like, that's not unconditional love, and that's going to create a lot of dysfunction. And remember, even on your part, like even little lies or holding back the truth a little bit is still a subtle form of control and manipulation. People pleasing is not kind, you guys. People pleasing is not kind. It's a form of control. It's a form of manipulation, because you're not being authentic in an attempt to control other people's experience and perception of you. Again, truth doesn't live there. People can feel also when you aren't able to like handle a difficult or challenging emotion, when you can't hold a paradox, when you freak out, have a meltdown, or punish them as soon as the situation gets a little bit uncomfortable, or they say something that you don't like. Like if you yell, again, fight back, withdraw, give the silent treatment, etc. Like, this is a way that you play a role in attracting people who lie to you, because you need to be a safe space, because you need to be able to have challenging conversations. And again, hold two truths simultaneously. Like whatever your truth feels, like you feel that that's your truth, and then the other person's truth, which is their experience, even if you don't like it, even if you feel like, oh, this really makes me upset. Again, if you can't be with your own difficult feelings, and this is what I teach people, like 90% of what I do is teaching you self-intimacy, self-awareness, emotional soothing techniques, ways to regulate yourself so that you are a whole vessel and a safe container for intimacy to bloom. But deep intimacy can't happen unless, again, these things start to get resolved. So, continuing here, if you can't be with your own difficult feelings, then you're creating an environment that breeds falseness, right? And breeds withholding, because you're saying, I can't handle it, and if you don't agree with me, there will be consequences. This is not the same as having zero boundaries, right? Like, you can have non-negotiables in your relationships, like no abusive, for me, like, one is no abusive, damaging language. No matter how upset I am, I'm never going to use abusive language. I mean, I don't even really do it to myself, but like, that for me is definitely a non-negotiable. I mean, even cheating for me is a huge non-negotiable. However, you have to understand, like, if you aren't living in integrity with these things, if you don't tell yourself the truth, if you don't uphold and truly live and embody the qualities that you want in your partner, then expecting them to live in the truth and in integrity is literally delusional. So you have to be the change you want to see first, or at least you have to start heading in that direction. Nobody's perfect. And giving people grace to grow. Like, a sustainable relationship where both parties are choosing to learn together in this fire of alchemy, and it burns. Like, in this case, you need to offer compassion, because growth like this is not linear, right? Like, we all have resistance, we all have fear. We do slide backwards sometimes, we fuck up, shit happens. You need to decide, like, what you're willing to handle. You need to, like, decide for yourself, like, where will I go with this? How far will I go with this? If you're truly devoted to your own growth, I can feel people getting like, but what if they're doing this? What if they're doing that? What I will say is that if you're truly doing these practices, and this is where mentorship comes in clutch, you guys, whether it's you're in community with a group of people, whether you're working with someone one-to-one, this is what I do. You don't see your own blind spots necessarily. Like, this is why doing it with others or doing it with a mentor is so helpful. Number one, you won't feel so alone. Number two, you can really catch yourself, because I told you at the beginning of this is very nuanced. This is a refinement process. This is not like basics 101. This is more like, okay, I know my basics. Now, how do I refine this in a container or in a connection with another person without constantly trying to control their experience and their process and micromanage what they're doing? You don't need to worry about what they're doing all the time. What you need to do is become the thing you want, and then they're going to, just organically, or your reality is going to change, and your partner, shockingly, things will start to shift. I know it because I've been doing this for a really long time. If you're truly devoted to your own growth in these practices, it is extremely likely that you will continue to see positive shifts over and over happen in your connections. If you're not seeing anything transform, then there's probably something about your process that's not quite there yet, and it needs a tune-up. It's very rare that I see people genuinely practice these things and their relationships don't change. Like, super rare. I'm just putting that out there. So as I said, sacred union, really, again, there's this like fantasy version of it online that most people, like, they're just not getting it. And I understand this is like a kind of complex, deep topic, but there's this romanticized version of this. And then there's the real practice. And I think spiritual partnership is one of the most advanced, accelerated paths of spiritual growth that we have. It's like really not an easy path, but it's an extremely valuable, worthwhile, beautiful one. And you know, in the beginning, you're kind of in this like first stage intimacy where you're just like reenacting your childhood wounding over and over. But once you work through that kind of stage one, and you get into this like more, I'm just labeling it stage 2 and 3, or kind of in alignment with like the polarity teachings, like someone like David Deida. So I don't follow him super closely, but I'm aware of those teachings. I will say in my own experience, once you work through some of this like rudimentary stuff, your like old primordial wounding, and you get into this kind of second to third phase intimacy where you have better boundaries, you're more self-aware, and it's not this like constant loop of the trigger over and over and over, you'll move past that point. Then it gets more fun. Yes, challenges arise, but not constantly. You're not always in this repair process. When you're in this constant repair, like, you've got to burn through this phase though. You have to get past this part to get to the more fun stuff. You do. So that's why I'm like making this video, because I'm trying to get it out there. Like, I've been at this for 12 years. It's not quick. I work with people in long containers because you need the time. I don't bullshit anyone or blow smoke up your butt. This is going to take a lot of effort. It's so worth it, you guys, but it's not easy. If it were, everyone would do it. So sacred union is really devoting ourselves to unconditional love, and sometimes love is fierce because love shines light on our shadows. It exposes our fears, our insecurities, our limiting beliefs. That's what love does. And so it can feel really vulnerable. So if you genuinely want to start repairing the trust in your connection, first you need to start cultivating self-trust. This is why I not just have a spiritual practice every day, but require one. If you want to be in any of my programs, you've got to create a spiritual practice daily. It doesn't have to be perfect at first, and some of these things I'm having you do without me involved, because you also need to be self-led and proactive and be willing to stick with this on your own, without someone holding your hand. But you've got to start cultivating self-trust, using your practice every day, consistency and showing up for yourself, holding yourself accountable, self-soothing through your own triggers and your own emotional upsets. And you also need to extend space to your partner, to be honest with you, and let them be imperfect, because they're not perfect, you guys. And demanding that someone else be perfect when you know damn well, one, you're not perfect, and number two, this growth is not a straight line. It's a spiral. It's a spiral. You make one step forward, you might take 2 steps back. You make a huge leap in progress, and then oftentimes what happens is resistance comes up, deeper layers of that pattern are going to emerge, and then you might slide backwards. It's okay. This is why you've got to be all in, completely devoted, 100%. So number 2, as I said, you want to also extend space to your partner to start being honest with you. For example, I'm just going to make an example. This is like one way to do it. Again, this is very nuanced. I would need more context to your situation. This is why I can work with you one-to-one on this, even if you want to do a 90-minute session to start. But for example, you can give, for example, your partner a grace period and be like, let's start with 2 weeks. I'm going to focus on my practice for the next 2 weeks. And what I'm asking in return is I'm giving you the space to be completely honest with me over the next 2 weeks. If your partner has this pattern of lying. But in that grace period, what you need to do not only is to mind your business and stay focused on your practice, stay in your lane, but also it would mean giving them really, truly, genuinely, extending them trust without the resentment. And this will take practice, because at first you're going to want to punish them. But this would mean no nagging at them, no picking at the wound, no holding things over their head as soon as you feel uncomfortable, using things from the past against them, using the wound as leverage or as ammunition, just no punishing. Maybe you start with 1 week if 2 weeks feels too much. And you could take it in phases like that and start with 1 week of really, truly focusing on you and allowing your partner the space to do what they need to do without making assumptions that they're going to lie to you. Because I just feel like what happens when there's a betrayal, and again, you have to remember this betrayal started within you not being honest. When people are like, oh my God, my partner cheated on me and I had no idea it was coming. 99.9% of the time, it's not true. You did know something was off, but you chose to not see it, or there was a way that you participated in not being completely, fully honest. Maybe you weren't fully asking for the needs to be met that you wanted to be met. Maybe you were settling in some ways. You were accepting less than you really deserve. You were holding on to the connection for the wrong reasons. You were trying to fill a void. We are always active participants in these patterns. But if we can't own that part, then we're not going to heal any further. That's where people get stuck. That's why this is a delicate, I warned you at the beginning. This is not easy, but I have such visceral experience with this and personal experience and success with this that I know that this can change. And I've got some very difficult cases that I worked through personally. So I will say maybe you choose this grace period, it's just an example, where you are practicing self-compassion, building your self-confidence, you can write down your highest values. This is an exercise. I've been doing this exercise. Actually, the one I used to use was a guy named, I think it was John DeMartini, had a really great values exercise. But either way, you want to, and now I have one that's a little bit modified, but you want to, that's more in alignment with figuring out how you're truly embodying your values. This is extremely important because you also align with partners based on your values, but you also misalign in partnership when your values aren't similar, especially your high values. So if you know your values and you're living in integrity with them, like mind, body, speech, and you're truly devoting yourself to this unconditional love, one day at a time, you guys. One day at a time. You start to recognize where your love is conditional, where you put conditions on it, where you put an agenda behind it, where there are strings attached, and you can start to slowly unwind that. But if you're really doing these things, you should start seeing shifts pretty quickly in how your partner responds to you, how they're interacting with you. You should notice them even wanting to come to you more, because they'll start to feel the difference that you are not only becoming a safe space for them, and yes, they deserve it, but if you start out with the attitude that they owe you, that you're already blocking healing. You're already preventing love from flowing there. See what I mean? The practice is a lot deeper than most people will go. And yet this is where the true transformation happens. So again, it's not going to change overnight, but you've got to really ask yourself, like, are you all in or not? If you want to repair something like this, betrayal, it requires a serious commitment to giving this time and having the patience to resolve it. And I understand I can hear it. The first question is like, yeah, but are they fully in? But if you're fully in and you're truly committed to this and you're not holding them hostage while you do your healing to owe you anything, that you really truly are able to focus on yourself. Again, is this nuanced? Yes. If someone is really harmful in a relationship, like, that's a different story. Like, people be like, oh, my partner's a narcissist. And that's like, well, that's a different type of healing that you need to do then. You need therapy, or you need to read books on narcissism. And again, people are constantly throwing that word around, and it's actually, narcissism full blown is very rare. We all have narcissistic tendencies, and a lot of that's it comes from unresolved trauma, that we didn't get our needs met. And so we find these like really twisted, dysfunctional ways to get our needs met. But I'm not talking about that. Like, honestly, that's like a different stage that comes before I feel this type of practice, because you can't feel like a victim to do the work that we're talking about today. You just can't. It won't work. So you have to ask yourself, am I all in or not? This is alchemy. Again, it's a deep purification of all of your own patterns that are not aligned with love. That means it's not a quick fix. It's a lifelong practice. And you have to ask yourself what kind of relationship you really want. Like, do you truly want a conscious partnership, or do you want the idea of a conscious partnership? Or do you think that the conscious partnership, all the issues are going to work themselves out, or that the person's going to come perfectly healed? They're not. They're not. People come at different levels of self-awareness. I have found that the more grace that I give the other person, the more they blossom in front of my eyes in ways that I couldn't have ever predicted. But if you assume things of people and you make an assumption right off the bat that they're never going to change, because we hear it all the time, people don't change. It's bullshit. You change, people change. I've transformed my relationships with my parents. I've transformed relationships with partners. I've transformed relationships with other family members, with clients, with all kinds of people. Did they change, or did I change? Did my perception of them change? I never told a lot of these people what I was doing. They weren't participating in the healing, and yet the dynamic totally transformed for the better. Where was it coming from? It was coming from me. But then as I changed and became more open and became more compassionate and more loving, what happens is that people feel safer. They want to come to you. They want to share more. They want to be more vulnerable with you. But if they feel your silent criticism and silent judgments and silent agenda, it's a repellent of deep intimacy. How deep do you really want to go on this path? This isn't for everyone. It's not, you guys. I think there are many layers and levels of this, and I think people land where they're meant to. But the type of work I'm doing, like I told you in the beginning, I want to go all the way. And if you're going to go all the way, it's like picking a guru. In Buddhism, you practice like we practice basically guru yoga. Like, you pick your lama, your Buddha in real form, your teacher, and you're like, I'm going to make this person a Buddha in my mind. Like, I'm going to purify my mind to the point where I see this as a perfected being. But you're looking at a human being in front of you, and you're going to perceive them however you perceive them. But that's the practice. Or, for example, you're in a relationship and you're like, this is the relationship that I'm going to work out my shit in. This is the one. But that's not a beginner's practice. That requires more intermediate and advanced practice. And I would recommend that if you want to do this type of partnership, truly, that you get support. Because I don't think, I couldn't do all of this alone. You know, I have teachers and I have mentors and I have people that help me to receive teachings on how to really love people and how to really transform your reality. Because otherwise I think this would feel overwhelming and maybe even impossible. But I'm down for a challenge. And what I mean by that is to challenge my own belief systems, challenge my own mind to change. And so, is there more? Sure. Could I do a whole workshop? Yes. If you want it, tell me below. You know, I can go more deeply into these points. I can make other examples. I can do it live, and you guys can be there and do Q&A. Let me know in the comments below. And like I said, this path is a lifelong commitment. And like I said, I've been at this for over 12 years. I've been on YouTube since, like, whatever, 2015. Almost 10 years of making these videos, and I was working before that, doing hands-on healing and relationship stuff in more of a physical way with people, through massage, through Reiki. And it takes time. It just takes time. It takes patience. It takes a ton of compassion. It takes a lot of, like I said, offering grace to other people. Like, you've got to give your partner the same amount of grace. And people will be like, yeah, but they keep doing the same thing over and over. But if they keep doing the same thing over and over and over, and you're actually practicing these things, then I would really question your practice. Are you really, truly transforming? Get some support. Again, get a mentor to see a blind spot. Dig deeper. Because if you're truly doing these things, your reality won't stay the same. All my relationships are different. Every single one is better. My entire life, from A to Z, every relationship, especially over the last 5 years, has transformed. I don't have drama. I don't have all that conflict anymore. I'm not dealing with passive-aggressive behavior. Does it creep in every so often? You get like a little glimmer of it? Yeah, but I'm aware. But it really doesn't happen like it used to. It just doesn't. I don't have like big power struggles anymore. It's just pretty peaceful. It's great. And that's because you got to do the work, you know? But romantic relationship is different. I feel it's the most exposing, it's the most intimate, it's the most triggering. It's like, if you want to be with someone, then you can't just walk away. If you live together, then it's like they're there every day, all day. That's why it's the yoga of relationship. It's like union is the yoking, it's the coming together, it's the merging. And when you merge with someone who has their whole experience, background, trauma, whatever else they have, you know, you're saying yes to the spiritual practice of it, but that's going to require your full devotion and your full efforts. But this lights me, it's the thing that gives me the most fulfillment in my whole life. I do it for free. For real, because I was doing this stuff before I started doing it for work, because I see that, like, to truly learn how to love people is the biggest gift that you can give yourself and give others. Honestly. So I'm going to leave it at that. Like I said, if you want a workshop, let me know. Or if you want to have me support you with this, because I'm sure you probably have a lot of questions if this is a pattern that you're trying to resolve. So if that's the case, then you can start with a 90-minute session, an intuitive session. Like in this particular session with this client, we didn't even use cards, we just talked. So that might be what you need. And that would be a great place to start. Another place to start with this, I have a few things. You can book a one-to-one. I've got the vow and the fully claimed audio bundle, which are really diving into this threshold where you're wanting to come into union. So you could be still single and right on the precipice, or you might be like my client, coming back into reconnection, but that's that point where you're not quite there yet and you need to make a commitment. The vow is like basically you saying, I'm devoted to this, to love, to this process, to this alchemy. 100%. I'm going all in, both feet in, not one foot out the door, not today I'm here, tomorrow I'm gone. Like, I'm all in, because it's going to require that, for real. And then fully claimed is about, again, being fully claimed in a relationship like this, not with a foot out the door. And so those are 2 audios. They're each about like 40 to 60 minutes long. So that's only $39 for that little bundle. You could do that. And if you're a woman who really wants to start this process and you've never worked with me before, like in a group program or one-to-one, then I've got the Return of Venus, which is a self-led 5-week Sacred Feminine Embodiment program. Why do you want that? Because deep intimacy and conscious partnership, as I spoke about today, is really also like a somatic experience. If you can't hold mental discomfort, but you also can't hold it physically in your body, because deep intimacy is so revealing and exposing and challenging, then we repel connection unconsciously usually. So that is a way to, 1, start cultivating a daily practice, because the stuff that I put in there is very gentle and flexible and meant to be integrated into a busy schedule. So like in 10 minutes or less, 10 to 15 minutes a day, really 10 or less to start. And you start cultivating a daily practice, which for me, like, you've got to do that first before I can get into these advanced teachings. Because if you can't keep up with a practice, like, you won't be able to keep up with the relationship stuff, because they go hand in hand. This is a conscious relationship for me is a spiritual practice. So then I want you to also have a meditation practice and ways that you're working with your own mind. That's a requirement. Otherwise, like, again, it's not coming from the other person, it's coming from you. So in Return of Venus, you would get 5 weeks of content around, deep intimacy, conscious relationship, feminine, masculine polarity, like the energetics, slowing down, dropping out of your head and into your body, especially if you're an overthinker, overanalyzer. And also starting to get into this, like, healing around the distortion with your sensuality. My camera cut out. I was saying on Return to Venus that this is a excellent first step. Like, if we've never worked together and you're not familiar with like deep intimacy practices, you need to develop a relationship with yourself and with your body first. And it just requires, like, to be in this type of partnership, it requires a level of, again, accountability, cultivating your own spiritual practice, emotional safety, inner physical safety, dissolving fear and guilt and shame around closeness, around difficult emotional stuff, around sensuality and your sexual energy. Like, it's very layered. So Return to Venus is a beautiful, gentle, it's still potent, it's still powerful, but if this is new for you, that course would be a great way to start. And again, to be in these more intermediate teachings, you need to be self-led. You need to be able to hold yourself, come to a practice every day, and do these things without anyone holding your hand, right? So that's why it's important for you to develop your own stuff, these like primary pieces first. So Return to Venus is available. And yeah, if you're ready for one-to-one, we've worked together before, and you're just at a like more intermediate level with all of this, you're at a higher place with this, you've been at this for a while, you've done maybe a lot of preliminary relationship healing, or you've worked with other coaches and done other things, then feel free to take a look at the one-to-one mentorship. I do require new clients to come in for a minimum of a year. As you can see with this video alone, this isn't quick, right? It takes time. If we've worked together before, then I can offer 6-month options as well. So I will leave it at that for this one. Sending you guys so much love. Again, if you have any other questions, like drop them below or schedule a session, and I will see you guys in the next one.